Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in Junior English, and we now turn in your hymnals to page 1276, 1277 and following as we introduce you now to the last unit of your Junior Lit textbook, Unit 6, and we'll be working from 1970 to the present, as they call it. You might want to take a look at the Tom Wolfe quote at the bottom of 1277. By the way, you can see on 1276 that this unit is called New Voices, New Frontiers, Literature of the Contemporary Period. And notice your quote from Tom Wolfe, "Perhaps this is our strange and haunting paradox here in America. We are fixed and certain only when we are in movement." Let's go ahead and turn now to the next page and just introduce you with your snapshot of the period on 1278. You have the writers that we'll be studying there at in the middle of the page. America emerged from the Cold War period as the sole superpower in a dramatically changing world. While national boundaries are still critical, globalization is the new model as the countries of the world become ever more interconnected economically, environmentally, culturally. Increasing globalization is due in large part to the dawning of the information age, a term I'm sure you've heard, during the second half of the 20th century. Computers, the internet, cell phones, and other new technologies changed the way people around the world work, play, communicate. The world has become simultaneously more accessible and more complex. Despite this new global energy, the new millennium opened with shock and sadness for Americans. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 damaged the sense of security that Americans had always enjoyed. Though the world in the 21st century offers opportunities, beauty, and inspiration, it also presents individuals with complex questions and uncertainty. You, of course, also have your globalization in the marketplace happening on page 1279, as well as some other kinds of graphs that are provided for you. Let's turn now to 1280. And we'll begin with the historical background, the contemporary period, 1970 to the present. We'll simply read. All you're doing now is just taking notes at level 1 and just bullet pointing the information as we go. Okay? The contemporary period, 1970 to the present. When they created the United States, the American founders set out to build a democratic republic in a natural paradise. They established a great nation. They foresaw its leadership role, but they could hardly have imagined how interconnected and interdependent all the nations of the world would become by the 21st century. At the nation's beginning, Americans celebrated the New World. Now, as part of the global community, Americans are shaping a new world. First heading, Politics and Space. The bicentennial of the United States in 1976 highlighted pride in the American accomplishment, even though the nation was still recovering from the traumas of the Vietnam War and Watergate affair, the burglary of Democratic Party headquarters that forced the resignation of President Richard Nixon in 1974. Americans celebrated the nation's 200th birthday with great pride. Space exploration, especially the triumph of the space shuttle, offered an escape from politics. The first American woman in space, Sally Ride, was part of the crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger in 1983. Next heading, Leadership in Conflict. Voters sent Ronald Reagan, the popular governor of California, to the White House in 1980 and again in 1984 with a landslide victory. George Bush, Reagan's vice president, was elected to the presidency in 1988. Seeking re-election in 1992, Bush faced a tough fight against high unemployment, a recession, and growing dissatisfaction with government. Democrat Bill Clinton and his running mate Al Gore, the youngest ticket in American history, won the election. Clinton won re-election in 1996, but in 2000, Al Gore lost to George Bush's son, George W. Bush. In the wake of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, Bush was re-elected in 2004. The elections of 2008 resulted in a historic victory with the election of Barack Obama, the nation's first African-American president. On page 1281, the next heading, the computer age. By the way, I should just point out, we obviously finished with the election of President Obama in 2008. for this textbook. That's only because this textbook company is going to have published just after the 2008 election. Of course, we are familiar with the re-election of President Obama, and then of course now, as we are giving the lectures in the summer of 2017, we just have elected into office, of course, for the first 200 plus days, President Trump, right? The computer age. Let's continue. With the introduction of the microprocessor in the 1970s, American life shifted. Computers that began as military and business tools soon became personal companions. The internet has made information and entertainment available at any time to anyone with a desktop computer, a laptop, or a cell phone. Even smaller, faster, and easier technology can now connect anyone with anyone electronically, raising new questions of privacy and personal relations. Mail has a new meaning, and text has become a verb. Workers telecommunicate and fans download their favorites. From how your government runs to how you gossip with your friends, computers have transformed virtually every aspect of life in America. It's significant how we're reading a chapter, Unit 6, Introduction, called Contemporary, and of course much of what we're reading here is kind of arcane and old, right? Notice no mention of smartphones here, no mention of Twitter, no mention of Facebook. All of that, of course, happening really after and becoming popular after this textbook has been published. The new millennium. Despite the speed of technological change, however, some of the oldest issues still dominate human affairs. What is our relationship to the natural world? How can people of different cultures live together peacefully? How can people build a better future? One thing is certain. As the new millennium moves forward, America will continue to change, and Americans will continue to explore new aspects of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, your key historical themes here under this heading, Creating the Future. Let's see 4 of them. 1, Americans celebrated 200 years of progress and democracy during the 1976 bicentennial. 2, Americans struggled with political and economic problems at home while dealing with intense international conflicts. 3, Americans live in a time of accelerated technological change that makes life easier and raises new questions. 4, Americans work toward creating the future while facing persistent issues such as care of the natural world. All right, let's turn now to 1282. The essential questions across time, the contemporary period. Question 1, how does literature shape or reflect society? And the first heading, what social and political events have had the greatest impact on Americans since 1970? Well, this is a huge debate. They're going to give you 3 of them, which some of you will say, yeah, it makes sense. Others of you will say there's some things left out. The first heading, advance of the computer age. Digital libraries, electronic voting, global positionings, virtual communities. Americans work, play, think, and even feel differently than did earlier generations. In an increasingly wireless and paperless world, Americans express themselves differently. Change is constant and quick. Many Americans are eager to live on the edge of the latest electronic movement and moment. Next heading, cultural diversity. The 2010 census, 7 years ago, reported nearly 309 million people in the United States. By the way, if you want to Google and see how that number's changed and how many actual people are living in the U.S. today, encompassing a wide spectrum of races and cultural origins. Americans have grown closely attuned to cultural differences and diversity. Historians have revised views of the contributions of individuals once thought to be marginal, and virtually every cultural group has entered into the mainstream of American political, business, and artistic life. The next heading, terrorism. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 had an enormous impact on the American consciousness. Americans reacted with anger, fear, appeals for calm, calls for retaliation. The first decade of the millennium was characterized by an increased sense of vulnerability, more active participation in international affairs, and heightened awareness of the need to resolve the complex situation. Let's go ahead and go now to page 1283. The next heading, what values and attitudes have grown out of these events? First heading, personality versus anonymity. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. So goes the caption of a cartoon showing a canine computer user. The cartoon highlights a great advance and a great drawback of the computer age. People may express themselves more fully than ever before, but they may also remain or become anonymous. Computers have made trust, authenticity, and accuracy major social and cultural concerns. And then if you want to jump over really quickly, just to the next box over there, they have some information about blogs and democratizing the writing world. The life you blog may be your own. In fact, it probably is. Born of the word we blog, a log or record of activities, thoughts, and comments that anyone may post on the World Wide Web. Blogging has become a significant cultural enterprise. Contemporary technologies have made it possible for anyone to be published. Millions of people turn themselves into authors every day. Entering the blog sphere is like having a diary of the world available, the private made public. Want to know what someone in another part of the country had for breakfast? You can certainly find a blog that lets you know. And of course, since this is written, Twitter has taken off, right? Want to tell the world what you thought of the latest movie? Someone somewhere wants your opinion. In an age dominated by visual media, movies, television, video, webcasts, blogging reminds us of the central role that writing still plays in our culture. Of course, like all writing, blogs may be trivial, tedious, self-serving, stupid, or even cruel. We have obviously issues of online bullying and the like, right? They can also be intelligent, incisive, entertaining, and even beautiful. Political candidates explain themselves in blogs. Teachers expand their lessons in blogs. Of course, LearnStrong.net is sometimes an example of this if we do any blogging. Artists experiment in blogs, and the critics share their insights in blogs. It's even possible to become a professional and blog for a living. There is a world of words out there in the blogosphere, so blog away. The next heading, materialism and commercialism. While aiding many countries around the world in dealing with economic problems at home, the United States still revels in material progress. Despite ups and downs, commerce fueled by advertising provides most Americans with a high standard of living compared to that of most of other nations. Multiculturalism, the next heading. Once the melting pot image described American life, immigrants were expected to become indistinguishable from the mass of other Americans. Now, Americans recognize the value of maintaining and savoring the cultural identities of people who are at the same time American. Global awareness, too, has made the achievements of cultures around the world not merely exotic, but celebrated. Final heading, security. Attacked on its own soil in 2001, the nation guards itself with vigilance. Individuals to protect themselves from the new computer-assisted crime of identity theft. All right, let's turn over to page 1284. Next question. How are these values and attitudes expressed in American literature? Well, I have several headings here. Let's get them all in our notes. Diversity. Perhaps nothing characterizes contemporary American literature more clearly than the range of its writers. Authors of every race, age, religion, nationality, culture, occupation, political affiliation, economic class, and level of talent express themselves. Next heading, nonfiction. Although fiction continues as a vital literary mode, contemporary readers have a strong appetite for reality-based tales and nonfiction. Autobiography, biography, history, true life adventures, and stories of ordeals and practical accomplishments fill the bookstores. The next heading, technology. New modes of delivery made possible by computer technology enable people to read in new ways. Books and periodicals can be read on computer screens, cell phones, and electronic readers. Books or parts of books can be ordered and printed on demand. Themes. While American writers continue to explore the fundamental themes that literature's always addressed, some themes have a special appeal in our time. Let's look at 4. Identity. Personal identity and cultural identity. Who we are as individuals and who we are as Americans are often profound concerns for writers of contemporary fiction and nonfiction. Truth and illusion, next heading. What is true and how do we know it? In an age when special effects can manipulate almost anything, contemporary literature explores what it means to merge reality and imagination. 3. Success. Success, whether material, political, or spiritual, has always been an American preoccupation. Writers are now taking another hard look at it. What makes a person genuinely happy? How do ideas of success affect individuals, communities, or the planet as a whole? Finally, family. Contemporary society is redefining the family, creating the future with new social units. American literature is playing a vital role in examining what a family is and what it can be. And notice your 3 essential vocabulary words there, virtual diversity and spectrum, all 3 of those words possibly on the exam. Let's turn to 1285 really quickly. What is the relationship between literature and place? And then first question, what kinds of places do contemporary Americans write about? First heading, ordinary places. Of course, Americans still write about cities and towns, homes and schools, streets and malls. Readers find realistic life in the works of such writers as John Updike, Ann Taylor, Richard Rousseau, Richard Ford, Edward P. Jones, Michael Cabot, Jhumpa Lahiri, and Annie Proulx. By the way, I should just point out, Annie Proulx, that last name mentioned there, you might want to write that one down and Google her. Much of her life spent writing out here lately in Wyoming. Next heading, Ordinary Places Transformed. Some writers set their stories in what-if places that have been dramatically, even fantastically transformed. In Philip Roth's The Plot Against America, 2004, prejudice and chaos ruled the nation. In The Road, 2006, Cormac McCarthy tracks a grim journey through a post-apocalyptic American landscape. You might want to write down Cormac McCarthy, as many have argued America's greatest living writer of the late 20th, early 21st century. Next question. How does a global awareness show up in American literature? First heading, green literature. A literary subgenre emphasizes the relationship of people to the planet as a whole, tackling such topics as pollution, eco-terrorism. Eco-fiction includes Barbara Kingsolver's Prodigal Summer of 2000, T.C. Boyle's A Friend of the Earth in 2000. In nonfiction, essays by Annie Dillard and John McPhee build on the legacy of Henry David Thoreau. In poetry, natural imagery is the heart of the verse of Gary Schneider, W.S. Merwin, A.R. Amons. There is an A.R. Amons comment here on the in your box. Let's just read it really quickly. A.R. Amons, Emersonian postmodernist. A.R. Amons, a North Carolinian, looked at an unusual aspect of the American place in a long poem called Garbage from 1993. Amons takes trash and the reprocessing of it as a symbol of our times. Unlike modernists who strove to create poems that were well-constructed artifacts, Amons, in good postmodernist style, creates a talky, sprawling, shifty poem that is itself like a trash heap, and that considers, among so many other things, its own making. Emerson might have blinked and rubbed his eyes if he could have read this poem. However, he might also have recognized in its own distinctly American belief in newness. From Garbage by A.R. Amons. Garbage has to be the poem of our time because garbage is spiritual, believable enough to get our attention, getting in the way, piling up, stinking, turning brooks brownish and creamy white. What else deflects us from the errors of our illusionary ways? Here is the gateway to beginning. Here the portal of renewing change. I hope that you Google Garbage and can read for yourself this poem. It's a very interesting artifact now from 1993. In its time, it was quite radical. The next page, let's turn now to, is on page 1286. The next question. How has electronic technology, by changing our surroundings, also changed our literature? And then, of course, you have the heading here, communication. Let's read it. Technology has made communication faster and easier, has altered the limitations of physical space and place. And then you have 4 bullet points here. Character to character. Fictional characters frequently communicate by cell phone. Email as a common plot device. 2, author to reader. Authors now use websites to explain, expand, and discuss their works with the audiences. 3, reader to reader. Readers meet online to discuss books and authors sharing ideas and opinions. And finally 4, reader to author. Readers ask questions, respond, criticize, and make suggestions. This greater interactivity even turns some readers into authors themselves when fans write their own preludes and sequels to their favorite books. The next heading, cultural references. Similes, metaphors, allusions, references of all kinds now often stem from television, movies, and the world of computers. Electronic media have centered themselves in the cultural mainstream, sometimes overshadowing traditional literary sources. Contemporary readers are just as likely to meet a reference to the Starship Enterprise as they are to Captain Ahab's Pequod. Cultural merging is taking place. In 2007, MTVU, part of the popular MTV network, chose the renowned postmodern poet John Asbury to be its first poet laureate. The next heading, cyber literature. Cyber literature includes hyperfiction and electronic poetry, is literature that is composed and experienced on computers. Hyperfiction offers nonlinear, multipath, open-ended narratives that enable readers to travel around with a story, choosing where they want to go, deciding which characters and themes they want to follow. Electronic poetry uses the visual and oral capacities of the computer to unfold new and colorful poetic experiences right before the reader's eyes. The next question on 1287. What makes American literature American? First question. What qualities distinguish American literature today? First heading, cultural diversity. Just as American identity is a unique combination of the nation's mix of people, so is American literature a unique product of that mix. Cross-cultural contributions in subjects, forms, styles, and languages keep American writing alive, open, and adaptable. Expanding definition of literature. The definition of literature itself is changing. Just as nonfiction and fiction are merging, so are the popular and the literary. Walk into a bookstore to find a novel that includes recipes, a poem that accompanies a photo essay, a romance that's based on a true story, a graphic novel that is based on a movie, or a nonfiction novel based on a current event. All of it is literature. The next heading, traditional and postmodern. Despite all that is changing, however, the American literary tradition continues to flourish. Writers still produce literature in time-tested forms and styles. Hawthorne would recognize a story by Joyce Carol Oates, and Whitman would celebrate a poem by A.R. Emmons. The coexistence of the traditional and the new has spurred a new vibrancy in American literary life. And then your box on page 1287, The American Experience, Developing American English, Brave New Words by Richard Lederer. The history of a living language like English is a history of constant change. Language is like a tree that sheds its leaves and grows new ones so that it may live on. New words, like new leaves, are essential to a living, healthy vocabulary. Throughout history, as English speakers and writers have met with new objects, experiences, and ideas, they've needed new words to describe them. Nowadays, an average of 5,000 new words enter our language every year. Isn't that amazing? The Anglo-Saxons used a vivid term to describe the great wealth of English, the word hoard. We needed a name for the system that connects computers around the world. So we combined the Latin prefix inter together with the Anglo-Saxon word for a mesh fabric, and presto, we came up with the internet. The study of life on other worlds we have labeled astrobiology, from the Greek word parts astrostar, biolife, and ology, study of. The entire cosmological makeup of an organism we now call the genome, a blend of two Greek words, gene and chronos. The brave new worlds of the arts and sciences, technology, medicine make headlines every day, but our English word hoard will never